A small mistake, a huge price for the airline. The automatic doors slid open, and a blast of cool, air-conditioned air greeted Janelle Bryant as she stepped into the lobby. Everything here exuded modernity and professionalism. A place where every detail was designed to look perfect rather than to be truly functional. She tightened the leather strap of her handbag and walked forward with quiet confidence across the gleaming floor. Today wasn't just another workday. It was the day she would attend an important meeting with the airline's executive board, a discussion on diversity policies. It was a crucial step forward. But Janelle had no idea that before she could even set foot in the meeting room, she would be met with a painfully familiar shock. Approaching the reception desk, she offered a polite smile and placed her ID card on the counter. "Good morning. I have a meeting scheduled." The receptionist, a young woman in a navy blue blazer, didn't bother to look up. Her fingers tapping away on the keyboard. "Employees and guests must wait outside." Janelle frowned slightly. "I am an employee. I'm Captain Janelle Bryant." Only then did the receptionist glance up, her expression tinged with skepticism. But before Janelle could elaborate, the woman curtly interrupted. "Pilots should use the designated entrance. This area is for executives." Janelle took a slow, deep breath. She knew this building better than most. But today, she wasn't here as a pilot about to board a flight. She was here as someone taking part in a critical discussion. Keeping her composure, she pointed at her ID. "My name is on the list. Please check." The receptionist's cold demeanor remained unchanged. But before she could respond, Janelle noticed two people walking in behind her. They were also pilots, dressed in casual attire, but with one notable difference: they were white men. "Good morning," one of them greeted cheerfully. Immediately, the receptionist's face lit up with a welcoming smile. "Good morning, Captain Reynolds, Captain Harris. Please go right in. No ID check, no questions asked." They breezed past Janelle effortlessly, as if they belonged there, while she did not. Janelle turned back, keeping her voice steady. "You didn't check their IDs. Why do I have to wait?" The receptionist hesitated briefly before responding in the same indifferent tone. "I know them. They've been here before." That familiar, heavy feeling settled in Janelle's chest again, the weight of being doubted, of being overlooked. No matter how hard she worked. But this time, she wasn't going to stay silent. Because this time, she had proof. And this time, she wouldn't let it go unnoticed. Janelle sat in the conference room, her fingers tapping lightly against the smooth surface of the table. The executives were going on and on about the importance of diversity in aviation. But her mind was elsewhere. She was still stuck in that moment at the reception desk, the receptionist's skeptical eyes, the security guard's indifference, and the way her two colleagues had been welcomed without question while she was told to wait outside. None of it was new to Janelle. It had followed her throughout her entire career. She glanced at her reflection in the glass panel across from her. A navy blue blazer, golden wings gleaming on her chest, the insignia of a captain. But what unsettled her the most wasn't the moment of doubt itself. It was the fact that she had grown used to it. She had spent a decade proving she belonged here. She thought back to her first day at flight school. The excitement mixed with nerves as she stepped into the classroom, only to be met with a mocking voice. "Are you sure you're in the right class?" The room erupted in laughter. No one expected a black woman to pursue a career as a pilot. She didn't laugh, but she didn't argue either. She just told herself she would prove them wrong. Then, the first time she entered a cockpit as a first officer, the captain, a senior white man, looked her up and down. Skepticism clear in his voice. "Fresh out of training? You look a little green." She had already logged 4 years of flight experience by then. But to him, she was still an outsider who needed to prove herself. And the doubts didn't stop. Even when she became a captain. If she had been a white man, people would have assumed she was competent. But as a black woman, she had to prove it, every single day. Passengers had looked at her with uncertainty when they saw her enter the cockpit. Flight attendants had mistaken her for a junior staff member, despite her being the one in command. Ground crew had asked if she was lost when she walked toward her own aircraft. Janelle had grown used to being doubted. But today, she realized that just because injustice was familiar didn't mean it was acceptable. Janelle tightened her grip on the pen in her hand, her eyes fixed on the people seated around the conference table. They spoke about diversity, about their commitment to fostering a fair environment for all, but every word rang hollow. She knew it. Because just minutes ago, these very people had allowed a biased system to shut her out at the door. Memories replayed in her mind. Over and over again. For years, she had let these injustices pass without speaking up. Today, that would change. She took a deep breath, opened her laptop, and scrolled to a special folder, a collection of documents she had quietly gathered over the years. Inside were emails from senior management bypassing her promotion to give it to a less experienced male pilot. Messages from colleagues implying she was only kept around because the company needed diversity. Reports exposing the wage gap between white and minority pilots. Files the company had tried to bury. It was all evidence, and this time, she wasn't going to let it sit in a forgotten hard drive. At that moment, her phone buzzed. A message from a trusted colleague. A friend in the industry. Heard about what happened at reception. Unbelievable. You okay? She stared at the screen. A simple question, yet it spoke volumes. Everyone knew this was happening, but no one dared to challenge it. And that was exactly what the company counted on. They wanted her to believe this was just a minor incident, that it wasn't worth making a fuss over. They assumed she would let it slide, just as she had done countless times before. But this time, she had had enough. She opened her email and scrolled to a draft she had written months ago, a formal complaint detailing the discrimination within the airline. She had hesitated when she first wrote it. She knew what would come next if she sent it: retaliation. Pressure from the company, maybe even the risk of losing her job. But now, she wasn't afraid anymore. With a single click, she hit send. Janelle knew that a single action could unleash a storm bigger than anything she had ever faced. She set her phone down, trying to steady her breath, but her heart was pounding faster than ever. Over the years, she had watched people like her be pushed aside for daring to speak up. Would she pay the price this time? An hour later, the first response arrived. Not an apology, not a corrective action, just a corporate brush off. We regret if you felt uncomfortable. We remain committed to fostering a fair and welcoming work environment. If you would like to discuss this further, we can arrange a private meeting. Janelle smirked. Did they really think a private conversation would make this go away? They had no idea she had proof. And this time, she wasn't keeping it to herself. She picked up her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and pressed call. Hello? We need to talk, she said firmly. A pause. Then, the voice on the other end replied. You're ready? More than ever. The person on the other end was a journalist, someone who had been tracking discrimination cases in the aviation industry for years. He had reached out to her before, after hearing about the injustices she and other minority pilots had faced. Back then, she had hesitated, but not anymore. She was ready for the world to know the truth. Blank. Black female pilot denied entry at her own airline's headquarters. The article didn't just tell Janelle's story, it exposed a pattern of systemic discrimination within the airline. Emails, messages, and testimonies from other employees painted a damning picture. Within hours, the article went viral. I can't believe this is still happening in 2025. Why do minority pilots have to prove themselves over and over just to be treated fairly? If this is happening to an experienced captain, imagine what young pilots are going through. Then, more messages started pouring in, not just from pilots, but from flight attendants, ground crew, even passengers. I once saw a black pilot being questioned while his white colleague walked right through. I've worked here for 5 years and witnessed too much discrimination. I was pushed out of the industry for speaking up. Janelle's story was no longer just hers. It had become a movement. And the airline could no longer ignore it. The media storm, an airline on the brink. Janelle woke up the next morning to an inbox overflowing with messages. Her phone buzzed non-stop, emails, calls, texts from pilots, flight attendants, ground crew, even people she had never met. I was denied a promotion for no reason. Now I understand why. I've worked here for 10 years and always knew something was off. But no one dared to say it. Thank you for speaking up. We stand with you. But it wasn't just industry professionals. Passengers began sharing their own experiences. 2. I once felt uneasy seeing a black pilot enter the cockpit. I hate admitting that. Now I realize how deeply ingrained my biases were. I saw a flight attendant check a black pilot's ID while letting a white pilot walk through without question. I stayed silent then, but I won't anymore. On social media, The hashtag I stand with Janelle started trending. Her story had gone beyond the airline industry. It had ignited a national debate about workplace discrimination, about how people of color had to work twice as hard just to be seen as equal. Major news outlets picked up the story. A journalist on live television remarked, "We constantly hear companies preach diversity. But this is proof that many are just paying lip service. When a black female pilot with over a decade of experience is still treated as an outsider in her own company. What does that say about this industry?" The airline began to feel the pressure. Within 24 hours, they released an official statement. "We are conducting an internal investigation into the recent allegations. We remain committed to fostering an inclusive and equitable workplace." But no one believed them. The public response was pure outrage. An internal investigation? Sounds like a cover-up. Diversity commitment? Then why are there so few black pilots in your company? They don't care about fairness. They're just scared of losing money. And they were right. Stock prices started plummeting. Investors panicked. Passengers demanded refunds and boycotted the airline. Pilots and flight attendants threatened to strike unless real change happened. Janelle sat in front of her screen, watching it all unfold. She knew the company wouldn't go down without a fight. But this time, they couldn't control the narrative. Because this time, the world was watching. The airline in chaos, but Janelle wasn't done yet. Janelle set her phone down. Her hands clenched into fists. She had started a storm, and it was far from over. She opened social media. The hashtag I stand with Janelle was trending at the top. News articles, opinion pieces, and video analyses flooded every platform. Former employees of the airline had begun speaking out. "I worked there and was passed over for promotions time and time again. I have emails to prove it. It's not just black pilots. As a flight attendant, I faced discrimination too. They just wanted us to stay silent. They keep a blacklist of employees who file complaints. I was fired right after I reported my case." Janelle scrolled through the testimonies, adrenaline surging through her veins. This was no longer just her fight. This was an entire system unraveling. Meanwhile, the airline was spiraling into full-blown crisis. Stock prices nosedived. Customers demanded refunds, pledging to boycott. Investors started asking tough questions. And then, the worst possible thing for the airline happened. One of the biggest newspapers in the country dropped an explosive investigation. Exposed. The airline's hidden racial discrimination system, years of cover-ups unveiled. The report revealed clear pay disparities between white and minority pilots, qualified black pilots being repeatedly overlooked for promotions, employees being threatened or fired after reporting discrimination, a full-blown media bombshell. And then, the final blow, a leaked internal email surfaced. Let her rant. This will blow over soon. No, it wouldn't. Janelle stared at the email, rage bubbling inside her. They still thought she was just a passing storm. They were wrong. She picked up her phone and dialed her lawyer. They don't want to listen? Fine, let's take this to court. Janelle set her phone down, her gaze sharp and unwavering. If they wouldn't listen, she would make them face justice. A class action lawsuit was officially filed. Janelle wasn't alone. As news of the lawsuit spread, former and current employees of the airline stepped forward, bringing with them documents, records, and undeniable proof of the discrimination they had faced. A female pilot denied promotion 3 times, despite having far more experience than her male colleagues. A flight attendant demoted after filing a complaint about racial discrimination. A ground crew member fired immediately after reporting a manager for making racist remarks. The case quickly caught national attention. Legal experts, civil rights organizations, and even government officials took notice. The airline was in full-blown panic mode, desperate to contain the damage. They hired PR specialists and released an official statement. "We take diversity and inclusion very seriously. We are committed to improving our workplace to ensure all employees are treated fairly." But no one believed them anymore. Shareholders demanded accountability from the board. Customers continued boycotting, leading to devastating revenue losses. Employees leaked even more damaging internal documents to the press. And then, the final blow. A second leaked internal email surfaced. This one was even worse than the first. "We don't need to worry. If they don't like it, they can leave. We'll continue dominating this industry like we always have." The public outrage exploded. Competing airlines seized the moment, publicly committing to anti-discrimination efforts and actively recruiting employees fleeing Janelle's former company. The airline was spiraling out of control. Stock prices kept plunging. Investors pulled out. Top executives started resigning. But Janelle wasn't done yet. She wasn't just here to bring down one corrupt company. She was here to change an entire industry. Janelle stood by the window, gazing at the city lights below. She had come too far to turn back now. On the table, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Lawyers, journalists, former colleagues, everyone was watching the battle she had ignited. The lawsuit dominated the news. A reporter spoke on live television. The airline, once praised for its commitment to diversity, now faces damning accusations of systemic discrimination. Employees have come forward with undeniable proof. Can they escape accountability? Then came the fatal strike. One of the country's largest newspapers dropped a bombshell investigation using leaked internal documents. Exposed the hidden discrimination system behind the airline's diversity facade. The report revealed unwritten policies favoring white pilots for promotions, severe wage disparities between minority and white pilots, efforts to silence whistleblowers through intimidation, demotions, and firings. Public outrage exploded. Stock prices hit rock bottom. Investors pulled out entirely. Customers canceled flights en masse, switching to competitors. Then, the final shockwave, the government stepped in. The Department of Labor launched a federal investigation into the airline's discriminatory practices. The company could no longer hide. In a desperate move, the board called an emergency meeting. A painful decision was made. The CEO officially resigned. But Janelle wasn't here for just one resignation. She wasn't here to bring down one person. She was here to change an entire system. Janelle stepped onto the stage, looking out at the sea of faces before her. They weren't just colleagues. They were people who had been dismissed, doubted, and undervalued, just like she had been. The airline had fallen. The lawsuit was victorious, resulting in a massive settlement for the plaintiffs. The aviation industry was forced to implement new policies ensuring fairness and accountability. But for Janelle, this fight wasn't just about bringing down one company. She took a deep breath, gripping the microphone. I once believed that if I worked twice as hard, I would be recognized, but I was wrong. I once thought that if I stayed silent, if I ignored the injustice, if I simply tried to fit in, things would get better. But I was mistaken. She scanned the room, faces filled with hope, determination, and fire. Future pilots, young dreamers who wanted to fly high, but not at the cost of constantly proving they belonged. We didn't just take down an airline, we changed an entire industry. With the settlement funds, Janelle launched an organization dedicated to supporting marginalized pilots, women, people of color, and anyone who had faced discrimination in aviation. Pilot scholarships for those who couldn't afford training. Mentorship programs to ensure no one was left behind. A legal defense fund to protect those brave enough to speak out. She hadn't just torn down an old system, she was building a new one. A better one. The room erupted into thunderous applause. But this time, the applause wasn't just for Janelle. It was for everyone who had dared to stand up. For those who had once been afraid, but found the courage to speak the truth. For a future where no one had to fight just to be acknowledged. Janelle smiled. Her battle was over. But the revolution she started had only just begun. Janelle once believed that if she worked harder, became better, and excelled beyond expectations, the biases against her would disappear. But the truth was, when a system is built on injustice, no amount of effort can make it fair. It will always find a way to push you out. And the greatest lesson she learned from it all? Silence never leads to change. If she had chosen to stay quiet, if she had ignored the discrimination like she had done before, the airline would have continued operating as if nothing had happened. Black pilots would still be overlooked. Employees would still be dismissed and undervalued. Injustice would remain unchecked. But one voice can spark a revolution. When one person speaks up, others find the courage to stand. When the truth is exposed, those in power can no longer hide. When we refuse to accept injustice, we force the world to change. Janelle's fight was never just about her. It was about every person who had ever been doubted, overlooked, and forced to prove they were worthy. Her story is a reminder to all of us. Never accept injustice just because it has always been there. Never let anyone define your worth based on your race, gender, or background. Never be afraid to speak out, because when you raise your voice, you don't just change your own life, you change a generation. Have you ever witnessed injustice but hesitated to speak up? Remember, change doesn't come from those who stay silent. It comes from those who dare to stand.